Security kicks out Black Janitor. Minutes later, he buys the entire building. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. For 37 years, Samuel Jones had been the silent pulse of the Apex Tower. He was the first to arrive, before the city's concrete canyons echoed with the morning rush, and often the last to leave, long after the final glowing rectangle of a law firm's window had gone dark. His hands, though gnarled and etched with the fine lines of decades of labor, moved with a practiced grace, coaxing a mirror-like shine from the lobby's sprawling Italian marble floors. He knew the building not as a structure of steel and glass, but as a living entity. He knew the groan of the express elevator to the 50th floor, the specific draft that snaked through the west corridor during a winter storm, and the faint scent of rain-soaked ozone that preceded a summer squall. He was the building's confidant, its memory keeper, its most loyal, if invisible, guardian. But on this cold Tuesday morning in November, his guardianship was being violently revoked. The source of the disruption was a man named Arthur Sterling, the newly appointed director of operations for Omnicorp, the soulless conglomerate that had acquired the Apex Tower 6 months prior. Sterling was a man sculpted from corporate jargon and tailored suits that seemed a size too tight for his inflated ego. He moved through the world with a palpable disdain for anything that didn't reflect his own polished, superficial image. He saw the Apex Tower not as a landmark with a soul, but as an asset to be stripped, its inefficiencies, which to him meant its long-serving, loyal employees, to be purged. Samuel, with his quiet dignity and worn, but immaculate, overalls, was the embodiment of everything Sterling sought to eradicate. The confrontation was brutally public, a calculated piece of theater designed to intimidate the remaining staff. Sterling, flanked by 2 young, grim-faced security guards, cornered Samuel by the grand, revolving doors just as the morning tide of tenants began to flow in. His voice, a synthetic baritone honed in countless boardrooms, cut through the lobby's low hum. "Samuel Jones," he announced, his tone dripping with condescension, "your employment with Omnicorp is terminated. Effective immediately. Your services are no longer aligned with the forward-facing efficiency model of this organization." The words, though not entirely unexpected given Sterling's recent campaign of petty harassment, landed with the force of a physical blow. A hush fell. The rhythmic click of heels on marble ceased. A young analyst, phone pressed to her ear, lowered it slowly. Everyone watched. Samuel felt the weight of their collective gaze, a mixture of pity, fear, and a shameful curiosity. He looked at Sterling, his eyes, which had seen so much in this very lobby, remaining calm, betraying none of the searing indignation that coiled in his gut. Sterling, mistaking Samuel's composure for meekness, pressed his advantage. "Security will escort you to your locker to collect any personal items. You are then to vacate the premises and are not permitted to return. Is that understood?" He spoke as if addressing a child, a deliberate act of public humiliation. Samuel did not flinch. He simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a nod that contained the weight of 37 years of unwavering service, of countless storms weathered, of a deep, abiding love for the very stones beneath his feet. He turned, his back straight, and began the long walk across the lobby toward the staff corridor. Each step was measured, dignified. He refused to be hurried, refused to show the tremor of rage that shook his hands. He was aware of Sterling's smug, triumphant smirk, a fleeting image caught in the reflection of the polished brass fixtures he had tended to just yesterday. This was not merely the loss of a job. It was an erasure, an attempt to invalidate a lifetime of dedication. Sterling had not just fired a janitor. He had declared war on the very soul of the building. As Samuel walked, the quiet hum of the lobby seemed to transform into a low, mournful drone. But beneath the pain, a different feeling began to smolder, a cold, hard resolve. Sterling, in his arrogant blindness, had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had failed to see the man behind the overalls. He had failed to understand that quietness is not weakness, that observation is a form of power, and that sometimes the most unassuming figures hold the most surprising keys. The grand doors of the apex tower hissed shut behind Samuel, sealing off a chapter of his life. But they were also opening another, one that would unfold with a seismic force that Sterling, in his narrow world of profit margins and power plays, could never have possibly anticipated. The game was not over. It had just begun. The dismissal was the brutal climax of a meticulously orchestrated campaign of psychological warfare. From the moment Arthur Sterling had arrived, a harbinger of Omnicorp's new, sterile era, he had fixed his sights on Samuel. To Sterling, Samuel represented the old guard, a living remnant of the building's previous owners, the benevolent Harrison family, who had valued loyalty and craftsmanship over cutthroat efficiency. Sterling saw Samuel's deep institutional knowledge not as an asset, but as a silent challenge to his own superficial authority. The harassment began subtly. Sterling would follow Samuel on his rounds, his polished wingtips clicking ominously on the floors Samuel had just buffed. He would run a gloved finger along a windowsill, searching for a phantom speck of dust, or critique Samuel's time-honored techniques, suggesting harsh, industrial chemicals that Samuel knew would damage the building's fine materials. "We need to optimize your workflow, Jones," Sterling would say, his voice laced with a condescending concern. "Time is money. We can't be sentimental about old methods." The pressure escalated. Written warnings for fabricated infractions began to appear in Samuel's file. He was reprimanded for taking his designated break 2 minutes late, for a substandard polish on the third-floor elevator panel, for allegedly leaving a supply closet disorganized. Each accusation was a small, sharp cut, designed to bleed his spirit dry. Sterling's disdain was tinged with something uglier, a barely concealed prejudice. He would make snide remarks about Samuel's age, his slow pace, and in one particularly venomous exchange, had muttered just loud enough for others to hear, "This isn't a retirement home. We need a more dynamic face for this premier property." The implication was as clear as it was vile. Samuel, a man of profound patience, absorbed these slights with a stoic calm that seemed to infuriate Sterling even more. He simply continued his work, his dedication unwavering, his standards impeccable. This quiet defiance, this refusal to be broken, was what ultimately sealed his fate. Samuel's connection to the Apex Tower was deeper than any corporate executive could comprehend. He had started as a young man, hired by old Mr. Harrison himself, who had told him, "Son, this building is more than brick and mortar. It's a testament to this city. You take care of it, it will take care of you." Samuel had taken that to heart. He'd watched the Harrison children grow up, had seen them take over the family business, always maintaining their father's ethos of respect and community. He had seen booms and busts, celebrations and tragedies, all played out against the backdrop of the tower's stoic grace. He knew the secret histories of its offices, the faded water stain on the ceiling of a 22nd floor storage room from a burst pipe during the blizzard of '96, the exact spot in the lobby where a famous actress had once dropped her diamond earring, which Samuel, with his keen eye, had found and returned. He was the building's living memory. Omnicorp's takeover had been a cultural shockwave. The warm, familiar atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a cold miasma of fear and uncertainty. The Harrisons, forced to sell due to overwhelming financial pressures, had been heartbroken. Samuel knew they had fought to include clauses in the sale contract to protect the staff and the building's integrity, but he had watched with a heavy heart as Omnicorp and Sterling systematically dismantled that legacy. What Sterling, in his hubris, could never know was that Samuel's quiet observation was not passive. For years, as he moved silently through the building, he was not just cleaning. He was listening, learning, and absorbing. He overheard hushed conversations in boardrooms, saw discarded financial reports in waste bins, and pieced together the intricate, often fragile, financial ecosystem of the city's corporate elite. He understood the flows of power, the whispers of mergers, the vulnerabilities of over-leveraged companies. And for years, he had been acting on that knowledge. His simple, frugal lifestyle was a deliberate choice, a mask for a second life he led as a shrewd, disciplined, and remarkably successful private investor. The dismissal, therefore, was not just an injustice. It was a profound strategic error. Sterling thought he was pruning a dead branch. In reality, he was striking the trunk of a tree whose roots ran deeper and wider than he could ever imagine, setting in motion a chain of events that would bring his entire artificial forest crashing down. The small, immaculately tidy apartment Samuel called home was a world away from the gleaming opulence of the Apex Tower. There were no marble floors or soaring ceilings. Instead, the walls were lined with books, not novels, but dense volumes on market analysis, economic theory, and corporate law. His modest living room was dominated not by a large television, but by a sturdy oak desk, upon which sat two monitors displaying a quiet, steady stream of financial data. This was Samuel's sanctuary, his command center. His journey into the world of finance had begun decades ago, with a small inheritance from his mother. While others might have spent it on fleeting luxuries, Samuel, armed with a natural curiosity and a deep-seated desire for security, had decided to learn. He spent his evenings at the public library, devouring every book he could find on investing. He started small, with conservative, blue-chip stocks, studying their movements, understanding the forces that drove them up or down. He was a patient student of the market, eschewing risky, speculative ventures for a strategy of long-term, value-based investing. His work at the Apex Tower provided him with an unparalleled ground-level education. While polishing the boardroom table of a major investment bank, he'd hear snippets of conversations about emerging markets. While emptying the trash in a law office, he'd see memos detailing upcoming mergers. He never acted on specific inside information. His integrity was absolute, but this constant exposure to the high-level machinations of the corporate world gave him a unique, holistic understanding of the economic landscape. He learned to recognize patterns, to sense shifts in market sentiment, to identify undervalued assets that the titans in the tower, in their arrogance, often overlooked. He lived frugally, his janitor's salary more than sufficient for his needs, allowing him to reinvest nearly all of his investment profits. Over 30 years, through disciplined saving, shrewd stock picks, and the magic of compounding interest, Samuel had quietly amassed a fortune that would have staggered the very executives whose floors he cleaned. His wealth was a secret he guarded carefully, not out of shame, but because he saw it not as a tool for personal aggrandizement, but as a shield, a form of ultimate security. He had no desire for a lavish lifestyle. His satisfaction came from the intellectual challenge, the quiet empowerment, the knowledge that he was the master of his own destiny, regardless of his job title. When Omnicorp acquired the Apex Tower, Samuel's observations intensified. He saw their aggressive, debt-fueled business model, their reckless cost-cutting, their utter disregard for the building's long-term health. He recognized their strategy for what it was, a classic pump and dump, where they would slash operational costs to artificially inflate the building's net operating income, then flip it for a quick, massive profit, leaving the new owner with a deteriorating asset. He saw the cracks in their foundation, both literally and figuratively. He began to subtly shift his investment portfolio, strategically acquiring shares of Omnicorp. The stock was undervalued, as many serious investors were wary of its volatile leadership and high-risk strategies. But Samuel saw an opportunity. He knew the company was over-leveraged, its vast empire built on a precarious mountain of debt. A significant drop in revenue from one of its key assets, or a sudden downer in the market, could trigger a catastrophic collapse. The dismissal, the raw, public humiliation at the hands of Arthur Sterling, was the unexpected catalyst. For years, his wealth had been a defensive measure. Now, in the searing heat of that injustice, it was forged into a weapon. The quiet anger that simmered within him was not for revenge, not in the petty sense that Sterling would understand. It was for justice. Justice for himself, for the other loyal employees discarded like trash, for the Harrison family's legacy, and for the soul of the building he loved. As he sat at his desk that evening, the city lights twinkling outside his window, a new plan began to crystallize. It was audacious, complex, and fraught with risk. But Samuel was a man who understood risk, a man who had spent a lifetime calculating, observing, and preparing. Sterling had thrown him out of the building. Now, Samuel would not just get back in. He would buy it. He would wield the power of the very system that had created men like Sterling to dismantle their world, piece by meticulous piece. The quiet janitor was about to become the silent hunter. Samuel did not waste a moment on recrimination or grief. The following morning, long before the sun had risen, he was not heading to the Apex Tower, but to a discreet, glass-and-steel building in the heart of the financial district. He was meeting with Eleanor Vance, a senior partner at the city's most feared and respected corporate law firm. Eleanor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, had been Samuel's legal counsel for over a decade, helping him structure his investments and trusts. She was one of the few people in the world who knew the true extent of his financial prowess, and she held a deep, quiet respect for the man the world saw only as a janitor. She greeted him not with pity, but with a focused intensity. "They did it," she stated, her voice devoid of surprise. Sterling made his move. Samuel nodded, taking a seat opposite her grand mahogany desk. "He did, and in doing so, he has presented us with an opportunity." For the next hour, they spoke a language that would have been utterly foreign to Arthur Sterling, a rapid-fire exchange of legal precedents, financial instruments, and strategic maneuvers. Samuel, calm and precise, outlined his plan. It was twofold, a pincer movement designed to strike at OmniCorp's greatest vulnerabilities. The first part of the plan was aggressive and financial. Samuel instructed Eleanor to begin a massive, anonymous acquisition of OmniCorp shares. He would leverage a significant portion of his liquid assets to become not just a major shareholder, but the single largest individual shareholder. This would be a hostile move designed to destabilize the company's already shaky stock price and sow panic among its board of directors. They would use a series of shell corporations and blind trusts to mask the identity of the buyer, creating an aura of mystery and fear. The financial markets would buzz with speculation about a whale investor circling the wounded OmniCorp, ready to devour it. The second, more elegant part of the plan involved a deep dive into the original sales contract between the Harrison family and OmniCorp. Samuel, from a brief conversation with a heartbroken junior member of the Harrison legal team years ago, remembered a whisper about a unique, almost archaic provision, a legacy and stewardship clause. It was a complex covenant insisted upon by old Mr. Harrison, stipulating that if the new owners failed to maintain the Apex Tower to a specific, meticulously defined standard of historical integrity and first-class operational excellence, the Harrison Family Trust retained a right of first refusal to buy back the property at its original sale price, adjusted only for inflation. OmniCorp's legal team had dismissed the clause as sentimental, unenforceable fluff. Eleanor Vance knew better. It was an ironclad legal covenant, and Samuel had been meticulously documenting OmniCorp's violations for months. He had compiled a dossier that was nothing short of damning. It included dated photographs of frayed carpets, logs of tenant complaints about delayed repairs, maintenance reports showing the use of substandard materials, and notarized affidavits from other dismissed employees detailing the systemic neglect. He had even, on his final day, managed to discreetly photograph the harsh, corrosive chemicals Sterling had ordered for use on the priceless bronze fixtures. This dossier was the legal dagger they would plunge into OmniCorp's heart. The strategy was brilliant in its synchronicity. The hostile stock acquisition would put immense financial pressure on OmniCorp, forcing them into a defensive posture, draining their resources and making them desperate. Just as they were reeling from the financial assault, Eleanor would strike with a legal one, presenting the board with the undeniable evidence of their contractual breach and invoking the Harrison Trust's right to buy back the Apex Tower. And who would be financing the Harrison Trust buyback? A silent, anonymous benefactor, Samuel Jones. He wouldn't just be taking over OmniCorp. He would be liberating the Apex Tower, using the very legal instrument designed by its loving former owners. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. It's perfect, Samuel. It's poetry. They won't know what hit them. She began mobilizing her team, a small, elite group of the firm's sharpest legal minds. They worked with a quiet, furious intensity, poring over documents, filing preliminary motions, and preparing the financial architecture for the takeover. Samuel, meanwhile, remained the calm center of the storm. He'd spent a lifetime in the background, observing, planning. Now, from the quiet of his apartment, he was directing a corporate raid of staggering proportions. The gears were in motion. The trap was set. Arthur Sterling, strutting through the lobby of the Apex Tower, basking in the glow of his petty victory, had no idea that the foundations of his world were about to be systematically and irrevocably dismantled by the very man he had so carelessly discarded. The janitor was no longer just cleaning the house. He was preparing to own it. The first ripples of the storm hit the financial markets within 48 hours. A sudden, massive surge in trading volume for Omnicorp stock sent alerts flashing across trading desks throughout the city. The buying was relentless, anonymous, and incredibly well-funded. Financial news networks began to buzz with speculation. A mystery buyer is making a major play for Omnicorp, a polished anchor announced, sending the stock on a volatile ride. Analysts are scrambling to identify the source of this aggressive acquisition, with some speculating a rival conglomerate is launching a hostile takeover. The board of Omnicorp, led by their notoriously arrogant CEO, initially dismissed the activity as a temporary market anomaly. But as the buying continued, day after day, their anonymous suitor's stake growing from a mere 5% to a commanding 15%, then 20%, a cold dread began to seep into their boardroom. Their stock price, while initially rising, began to fluctuate wildly as investors grew nervous about the company's stability and the looming threat of a takeover. The CEO's blustering confidence gave way to panicked, late-night phone calls. They hired defense bankers, initiated poison pill strategies, but it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a picket fence. The buyer was too fast, too strategic, their resources seemingly limitless. Arthur Sterling, ensconced in his office on the 55th floor of the Apex Tower, remained blissfully ignorant of the high-stakes drama unfolding. He was too consumed with his own micromanagement, focused on implementing petty new rules and continuing his purge of inefficient staff. He had replaced Samuel with a crew from a cut-rate cleaning service, and the building was already beginning to show the signs. A thin film of dust coated the once gleaming handrails. The lobby's magnificent ficus plants were beginning to wilt from neglect, and tenants were starting to grumble about the declining standards. Sterling dismissed these complaints as the whining of a spoiled clientele, completely oblivious to the fact that each one was being meticulously logged and added to Eleanor Vance's growing mountain of evidence. He was so focused on the small war he thought he had won that he failed to see the much larger one being waged against his employers. Samuel watched the chaos unfold from the serene calm of his apartment. He was a general commanding a battle from a distant hill, his movements precise and devastating. He felt a quiet, intellectual satisfaction in seeing his strategy executed flawlessly. He had predicted Omnicorp's panicked, clumsy reactions, their arrogance blinding them to the true nature of the threat. They were looking for a rival corporation, a hedge fund titan, a name they recognized from the society pages. They never once conceived that their adversary could be an invisible man, someone they had never even registered as a player on the board. A week into the financial assault, with Omnicorp's board in disarray and their resources stretched thin defending against the stock market raid, Eleanor Vance made her move. She sent a single, impeccably drafted letter via courier to the personal office of Omnicorp's CEO. It was not a threat or a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. The letter formally detailed, with excruciating precision, over 100 separate breaches of the legacy and stewardship clause from the Apex Tower's original sales contract. Attached was a summary of the evidence, hundreds of pages of documentation, photographs, and sworn affidavits. The letter concluded with a simple, devastating statement. Pursuant to Section 14, subsection B of the executed sales agreement, the Harrison Family Heritage Trust hereby invokes its right of first refusal to repurchase the Apex Tower property. The funds for the transaction are secured and available for immediate transfer. We await your prompt compliance. The CEO reportedly read the letter, his face draining of all color, and immediately called an emergency board meeting. The panic that had been simmering in their boardroom erupted into a full-blown inferno. Their legal team, who had once dismissed the clause as sentimental nonsense, now read it with dawning horror, recognizing its ironclad language. They were trapped. They were being simultaneously attacked on the financial front by a mysterious hostile buyer and on the legal front by the ghosts of the past. They were cornered, outmaneuvered, and facing a catastrophic financial loss. The quiet janitor had them in a checkmate. The beauty of the plan was that they still didn't see the connection. They believed they were fighting two separate, unrelated wars. The idea that a single, brilliant strategist was behind both assaults was a reality too fantastic, too humbling, for their corporate egos to even contemplate. The stage was now set for the final, dramatic act. The day of the reckoning arrived with a cold, clear sky that seemed to mock the storm brewing inside the Apex Tower. News of the Harrison Trust's legal move had leaked, and the building was a hive of frantic whispers and anxious speculation. The remaining long-term tenants, many of whom had revered the Harrison family, felt a surge of hope, while the newer Omnicorp loyalists paced their offices with grim faces. Arthur Sterling, for the first time, felt a prickle of genuine fear. His superiors had been screaming at him over the phone for 2 days, blaming the building's operational failures for the legal catastrophe. His carefully constructed world of authority and control was beginning to fracture. He was standing in the lobby, berating a young security guard about the state of the wilting plants, when the grand revolving doors began to spin. A palpable shift in the atmosphere, a sudden drop in the ambient noise, caused him to turn. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. It was Samuel Jones. But this was not the Samuel Jones he had dismissed. Gone were the worn overalls, replaced by a bespoke, charcoal gray suit that fit him with an understated elegance. His quiet dignity had been transformed into an aura of undeniable power. He stood taller, his posture perfect, his gaze steady and piercing. He was flanked by Eleanor Vance, her expression a mask of cool, professional triumph, and 2 other sharp-suited lawyers from her firm, all of them carrying expensive leather briefcases. The lobby fell into a profound silence. The only sound was the soft, confident click of their shoes on the marble floor as they advanced toward the main reception desk. Every eye was on them. Tenants paused mid-sentence. Staff froze in place. The entire building seemed to hold its breath. Sterling, his mind struggling to process the impossible sight, reacted with the only tool he had: bluster. "Jones," he sputtered, his voice cracking slightly. "What is the meaning of this? I told you you are trespassing. Security, remove this man from the premises immediately." The young security guard he had been berating took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, his eyes wide with confusion, sensing the dramatic shift in the power dynamic. Eleanor Vance stepped smoothly in front of Samuel, a single, elegant motion. "I would advise you to stand down, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice calm and as sharp as cut glass. "Mr. Jones is not trespassing. He is here at the invitation of the new ownership." Sterling blinked, his face a contorted mask of disbelief. "New ownership? The Harrison Trust? That's impossible." "Oh, the transaction was completed an hour ago," Eleanor replied with a slight, predatory smile. "The Harrison Trust, with the full backing of its primary benefactor, has officially reacquired the Apex Tower. Omnicorp, facing overwhelming legal and financial pressures, had no choice but to comply." Sterling stared, speechless, his mind reeling. He looked from Eleanor's triumphant face to the impassive lawyers, and then, finally, to Samuel. He looked into the calm, steady eyes of the man he had publicly humiliated, the man he had considered less than nothing. And in that instant, A sliver of the horrifying truth began to dawn on him. But the reality was far grander, far more devastating than he could yet comprehend. Samuel then took a step forward, his presence commanding the space. He looked past Sterling, his gaze sweeping across the lobby he knew so intimately. He saw the dust, the neglect, the wilting plants, the visible signs of the disrespect that had been shown to this place he loved. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with a firm, unwavering resolve. The moment of poetic justice had arrived. He turned his attention back to the trembling, sputtering Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," Samuel said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the silent lobby. It was the first time he had ever addressed Sterling by name. Omnicorp services are no longer required at the Apex Tower. Effective immediately. He paused, letting the echo of Sterling's own words hang in the air like a death knell. "Your personal effects will be packed and sent to you. A security detail," he gestured to the two imposing lawyers beside him, "will now escort you from the building. You are not permitted to return. Is that understood?" The reversal was absolute, the humiliation complete. Sterling stood, utterly broken, his face a ruin of collapsed arrogance and dawning, abject terror. The quiet janitor had not just returned. He had returned as a king, ready to reclaim his kingdom. The silence in the lobby stretched for a heart-stopping moment, then shattered as Sterling, in a final, pathetic spasm of defiance, found his voice. You can't do this," he shrieked, his voice thin and reedy, a stark contrast to its former booming authority. "Who do you think you are? You're just a janitor." A low murmur rippled through the onlookers, a collective intake of breath at the raw, ugly prejudice laid bare. Eleanor Vance arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "He is the man who owns the building you are standing in, Mr. Sterling. The primary benefactor of the Harrison Trust, the single largest shareholder of the company you used to work for, and your new landlord. I believe the correct term is visionary investor, not janitor. Though I'm sure Mr. Jones is proud of both titles." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted. A young woman at the coffee bar dropped a tray, the clatter echoing in the stunned silence. The idea was too immense, too cinematic, too perfectly just for them to immediately grasp. The quiet, gentle man who had polished their floors, the man they had watched being so cruelly dismissed, was the architect of this corporate earthquake. Sterling's face crumpled. The last vestiges of his bravado evaporated, replaced by a wave of nausea and primal fear. His world had not just been turned upside down, it had been atomized. He looked at Samuel, truly seeing him for the first time, and saw not an old man in overalls, but a formidable power, a silent, strategic genius who had played him and his entire company with the skill of a grandmaster. "Security," Samuel said again, his voice firm, this time addressing the building's actual security staff, who had been watching, frozen, from the sidelines. "Please assist these gentlemen in escorting Mr. Sterling from my building." The head of security, a man who had worked under Samuel's quiet gaze for 15 years and had despised Sterling from day one, snapped to attention as if waking from trance. A broad, relieved grin spread across his face. "With pleasure, Mr. Jones," he said, the respect in his voice clear and profound. He and another guard moved swiftly to flank the now catatonic Sterling. As they led him away, a broken, shuffling figure, a spontaneous applause broke out. It started with the maintenance crew and the cleaning staff, who had gathered at the edge of the lobby, their faces alight with a joy that was fierce and personal. It spread to the receptionists, the baristas, the long-term tenants. It was not a polite, corporate applause. It was a roar of catharsis, a celebration of justice, a resounding welcome for their true guardian's return. Sterling, his face ashen, was guided out a side door, his reign of terror ending not with a bang, but with a humiliating, ignominious whimper. With the lobby now clear of its toxic presence, Samuel turned to the assembled staff. The applause quieted, replaced by an expectant hush. He stood before them, a figure of quiet authority and immense grace. "To all of you," he began, his voice resonating with a deep, heartfelt sincerity, I know the last 6 months have been difficult. That era is over. The Apex Tower will once again be a place of respect, of dignity, and of excellence. His first official act was to announce the immediate reinstatement of every employee unjustly terminated by Omnicorp, with full back pay. A fresh wave of cheers erupted. He then announced a significant, across-the-board wage increase, starting with the lowest paid positions, and the restoration of the full benefits package the Harrison family had always provided. The atmosphere in the lobby transformed. The lingering fear and anxiety that had permeated the building for months evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of hope and renewed purpose. Samuel then walked over to the wilting ficus plants, a symbol of the recent neglect. He gently touched a drooping leaf, his expression one of sad concern. He looked at the new head of maintenance, a man he had known for 20 years. "David," he said quietly, "let's get these plants some water. And let's order the proper fertilizer, the one Mrs. Harrison always used. Let's start by healing the small things." It was a simple, profound gesture. It signaled that this was not just a change in ownership. It was a restoration, a return to a philosophy of care, detail, and profound respect. The quiet janitor had not just taken back the building. He was already beginning to heal its soul, starting from the ground up. The days and weeks that followed Samuel's astonishing return were a whirlwind of transformative action. He moved with a quiet, deliberate urgency, his deep, intimate knowledge of the building guiding his every decision. He established a temporary office not in the lavish penthouse suite that Sterling had occupied, but in a modest, unused space on the third floor, a room with a clear view of the lobby, allowing him to remain connected to the building's daily pulse. His leadership style was a revelation. There were no arrogant memos, no top-down decrees. Instead, he practiced what he had always done. He walked, he observed, and he listened. He spent hours with the engineering team in the cavernous basement, discussing the long-neglected boiler and HVAC systems, his questions so precise and knowledgeable that the chief engineer was left speechless. He met with the cleaning crews, not as their boss, but as a former colleague, soliciting their advice on the best materials and most efficient scheduling, valuing their on-the-ground expertise. He reinstated the Harrison family's long-standing contracts with high-quality, local vendors, from the landscaping company that had tended the lobby's plants for 2 generations to the family-run service that meticulously maintained the building's complex elevator systems. The cheap, cut-rate services hired by Omnicorp were summarily dismissed. The physical transformation of the Apex Tower began almost immediately. Specialized artisans were brought in to painstakingly restore the bronze fixtures Sterling had nearly ruined. A new, state-of-the-art, environmentally friendly lighting system was installed, casting the lobby in a warm, welcoming glow. The wilted plants were replaced with vibrant, thriving greenery, and the air itself seemed to become cleaner, fresher. The changes extended beyond the physical. Samuel established the Apex Community Fund, a significant portion of the building's profits dedicated to employee wellness, professional development, and community outreach. He created a scholarship program for the children of all Apex Tower employees, ensuring access to higher education. He implemented an employee profit-sharing plan, making every worker, from the window washers to the top-floor executives, a stakeholder in the building's success. This was more than a business. It was a social ecosystem built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared prosperity. News of the janitor tycoon and the remarkable transformation of the Apex Tower became a sensation, a feel-good story that captured the city's imagination. Reporters clamored for interviews, but Samuel politely declined, preferring to let the results speak for themselves. He was not interested in personal fame. His focus was on rebuilding the legacy that had been so carelessly desecrated. His story, however, took on a life of its own. It became a source of inspiration, a modern-day fable about the power of the underdog, the importance of integrity, and the ultimate triumph of quiet competence over loud-mouthed arrogance. People began making pilgrimages to the Apex Tower just to stand in the lobby, to feel the new atmosphere, to witness the tangible results of a different kind of leadership. The fate of Arthur Sterling became a whispered cautionary tale in corporate circles. Blacklisted from any high-level executive position due to the public and humiliating nature of his downfall, he was forced to take a series of progressively lower-status jobs, his arrogance a millstone around his neck. His name became synonymous with the kind of short-sighted, prejudiced leadership that the modern corporate world was slowly beginning to reject. He faded into a well-deserved obscurity, his story serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of underestimating the quiet ones. Samuel, in contrast, was just beginning to realize the full scope of his new role. He had set out to reclaim his dignity and seek justice. He now found himself in a position to redefine what a corporation could be, to create a model of ethical capitalism that could inspire change far beyond the walls of his beloved building. The quiet janitor, through an act of profound self-respect and strategic genius, had become a quiet revolutionary, his mop and bucket replaced by a far more powerful set of tools for cleaning up a broken system. Samuel's vision extended far beyond the gleaming marble of the apex tower. He understood that his newfound position gave him a unique platform, a powerful lever to effect change on a scale he had never imagined. His life's philosophy, forged in decades of quiet observation and disciplined self-improvement, was now the guiding principle for a burgeoning enterprise dedicated to a new kind of prosperity, one measured not just in dollars, but in human dignity and community well-being. He formalized the Apex Community Fund into the Jones Foundation, a major philanthropic organization endowed with a significant portion of his personal fortune and a perpetual percentage of the Apex Tower's profits. The foundation's mission was simple but profound: to invest in the overlooked and undervalued. Its primary focus was on providing vocational training, adult literacy programs, and small business grants in the city's most underserved neighborhoods, the very kinds of communities he had grown up in. He believed in giving people not a handout, but a hand up, providing the tools and opportunities for them to build their own security and success. The foundation's board was a carefully curated mix of financial experts, community activists, and, crucially, graduates of its own programs, ensuring it remained grounded and responsive to the real needs of the people it served. His leadership of the Apex Tower itself became a living case study in this philosophy. He implemented a robust apprenticeship program, partnering with local trade schools to bring in young people to learn skilled trades like electrical work, plumbing, and advanced building engineering. These apprentices received not only a living wage and invaluable hands-on experience, but also mentorship from the tower's seasoned professionals. Samuel took a personal interest in these young people, often taking time to walk with them, to share his story, and to instill in them the values of meticulous work and unwavering integrity. "There's no such thing as a small job," he would tell them. "There are only small attitudes. Every task, done with excellence and pride, is a building block for a life of character." The culture within the tower flourished. Employee turnover plummeted to virtually zero. A sense of ownership and pride permeated every department. The staff, now empowered, respected, and fairly compensated, provided a level of service that was unmatched in the city, which in turn attracted the most prestigious and stable tenants. The Apex Tower became a beacon of excellence, its success a direct refutation of Omnicorp's slash-and-burn model. It proved, in undeniable financial terms, that investing in people was the most profitable strategy of all. Samuel's story continued to resonate. He became a reluctant icon, a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt invisible or marginalized. He used his platform not to boast, but to advocate. He spoke quietly but powerfully about the need for fair wages, for corporate social responsibility, and for a fundamental reevaluation of how society defines value. He argued that the true strength of an economy lay not in its billionaires, but in the stability and dignity of its working class. The quiet wisdom he had cultivated over a lifetime now had a global audience. The man who was once dismissed as an inefficiency had become one of the most efficient agents for positive change the city had ever seen.